Being published by Bethesda, Doom Eternal is a broken mess that with the correct application of jank can be beaten in just about 19 minutes. It's really cool to see just how low a game can go, pushing at every possible corner and breaking every possible mechanic. But what about the people who really enjoyed the intended gameplay? Doom Eternal may be a broken mess, but it's also one of the most refined and fun combat loops ever made. And sometimes, speedrunners would prefer to actually play the game it was meant to be played. Some speedrunners want to test their might on combat instead of glitches. This is not that uncommon of a sentiment. Amongst viewers of speedruns especially, glitchless runs are quite popular, because they are a lot closer to what a person might expect when they imagine how a game might be speedrun. Both approaches to speedrunning are valid, and have amazing things going on inside them. But creating a glitchless category for some games may be way harder than you think it would be, especially when a game is as broken as Doom Eternal. You know what else is broken? The YouTube subscribe button. Make sure to click it and ring the bell so you get alerted for all my uploads. What specifically qualifies as a glitch is entirely subjective. Everyone has a different definition, and the application of that definition is also subjective. This creates problems when trying to create categories or rule sets in speedrunning. What do you think qualifies? Certainly clipping to the floor must be a glitch, right? But what about bunny hopping? Ballista boosting? Animation canceling? And what about pet caco? It gets really gray when you start trying to decide what is and what is not a glitch. This is why most communities have decided to do away with the term glitchless, because at the end of the day, the word glitch does not have any utility when crafting a category that's fun and engaging. Sometimes there are techniques and strategies that, while completely intended, are just unfun, like constantly returning to the main menu and loading back in to save small pieces of time in in-game time, but none in real time. What people really want is what they deem to be the most fun way to run the game for them. This is why the Doom Eternal community has decided to create the restricted rule set. This is sometimes also referred to as no major glitches. Due to the subjectivity involved with glitches, restricted is the preferred term. However, NMG or no major glitches is a holdover from older speedruns. This category has been around for a while. In fact, you may have even seen speedruns that follow this rule set before, in the super popular Ultra Nightmare 100% category. For a long time, the 100% runners of Doom have been fans of restricted rule sets, and because they have to do most of the combat and collect all the collectibles, doing insane out of bounds skips wouldn't even save them that much time anyways. More recently, however, there has been a rise in popularity for this rule set as it applies to completing the game as fast as possible, without having to do anything in particular. The application here becomes a bit of a gray area since a lot of the combat can be skipped in ways that makes it seem almost intentional. This is why much debate and deliberation is needed when trying to craft the rule set in a way that works for both 100% and any percent. The premise is simple. What sorts of strategies and techniques do we think should be removed from this category to make it the overall most fun experience possible when running the game? In execution, this is a much harder question to answer than you may think. But the Doom Eternal community knew a few things for sure. These tricks had gone too far, and they would definitely not be allowed in restricted. You have seen it a couple times, and you may even know how it works, but this is the very first trick that the Doom community wanted out of this restricted category. This is a slope boost. Essentially, a slope boost is where you stack the extra speed you gain from jumping up an edge of a slope by jumping many times. Each time you jump up the slope, you get a speed boost, and by mapping jump to the scroll wheel, you can hit quite a few jumps, gaining you a ton of speed. This can be paired with the use of slowing down time by opening the weapon wheel to yeet the Doomslayer thousands of feet into the air, allowing him to fly over the entire level right to where he needs to go. Obviously, this trick is insanely powerful and one of the more useful ones for the any percent category, but it was just way too overpowered to be allowed in restricted, as it would skip almost all of the combat and movement on almost every level. Next up, we have a Doom 2016 classic, the Rail Boost. Functioning similarly to how it does in 2016 while playing at high frame rates, if you do jump onto a railing and spam jump, you can get tossed into the air at insane speeds. Essentially, this was just a less powerful version of a slope boost, but it could achieve very similar things if applied correctly. Now for a potentially lesser known glitch, but a powerful one nonetheless. The IDKFA glitch, also known as the IDGAF glitch, is a trick where the player collects an in-game collectible that is a cheat code named IDKFA. This cheat code unlocks all weapon mods and masteries. It was ruled from the start that in speedruns, you aren't allowed to use the cheat codes you pick up unless it's in a level that you have already completed. Because you can go back into an earlier level and use this cheat code, you can trick the game into thinking that you have both the micro missile and precision bolt attachments for the heavy cannon active at the same time. This makes the gun shoot as fast as the micro missiles would shoot, but it shoots precision bolt bullets. Obviously, this is extremely broken and powerful. Even in any percent, there are quite a lot of spots where there is required combat, most notably the bosses, and they are all absolutely eviscerated by this glitch. The trick was deemed too powerful and not allowed and restricted because it would trivialize all of the combat past the point where you collect the collectible. Another small but powerful trick is called a zip. Zipping is a lot like those old Mega Man zips you may have seen in the past. If you line up on the edge of a platform and dash at a very specific angle, you'll gain an insane amount of speed. So much speed, in fact, that you can clip through walls and even go past death barriers. This is one of the few tricks that you can actually do on accident, and if you do, and you're in a restricted category, your run will be invalid. Sorry, homie. I have actually seen this trick invalidate runs in late game by pure chance. Trying to dash past the Crusher on Neckerval can lead you to accidentally zipping right through them, which unfortunately kills the run. So far, a lot of these make sense. Skipping content or trivializing the combat should be kept to a minimum if you want to keep the game well balanced for this category. But sometimes strategies are banned just because they aren't fun, and not because they're too powerful. This cute and adorable meatball can be the source of a lot of pain, even for the moderators. Turns out, you could just jump repeatedly on the head of the Cacodemon, flying higher and higher into the air. This is really slow, but it potentially could be used to skip some content that would only be otherwise doable by a slope boost. So sadly, this hilarious trick is also banned in No Major Glitches. The last big decision that was made by the community was to ban the use of an exploit called EBS, or Extended Black Screen. Turns out, if you quit to the main menu and then load back into the game with a precise timing, you can extend the length of the black fade-in screen. This has varying effects in a multitude of places. In some instances, it simply lets enemies spawn in earlier, saving a bit of time. In others, like Mars Core, it can break you free of a cutscene, allowing you to immediately get out of bounds and skip the whole level. Mainly, this is banned because it would lead to many instances of quitting and reloading over and over again all across the run to save small amounts of time, and sometimes even completely break the game. For most people, these bans established a rule set that was fun for both 100% and any percent. A nice balance between intended gameplay and the currently accepted speed strats. But one big lingering problem remained. Most people wanted there to be a distinction between inbounds and out of bounds. And in Doom Eternal, that's a bit more complicated than it may seem. What constitutes out of bounds in a game like Portal is a lot simpler. You are inside a box, and everything outside that box is out of bounds. When you're out of bounds, most of your field of view is an empty void. In Doom, however, lots of levels are completely outside, and don't even have invisible walls. Let's take Final Sin, for example. The level is a vast outdoor expanse across the rooftops of a bunch of skyscrapers. What would you consider to be out of bounds here? Exactly. That's a lot harder to quantify than something like an interior level. Starting off, they knew for sure that animation clipping to go straight through solid walls would definitely be considered out of bounds, so no more chainsaw clipping. It was also deemed early on that if you're in the location with lots of textures but not very much collision, then that's probably out of bounds. Another notable mention is that any location that could not be reasonably reached with normal intended movement mechanics would also be deemed out of bounds. As you can tell, this is a very hard thing to deliberate. Almost every single instance of a questionable location needs to be discussed and debated amongst the community, slowly ruling out one thing and then the next, creating more and more of a defined definition of out of bounds and in bounds over time. It was then decided that going over or under any invisible wall that does not ever disappear would be considered out of bounds. However, invisible walls that do despawn are fair game. That might be a little bit confusing, and I might be making the Doom Eternal community to look like it's a bunch of sticks in the muds, banning everything in sight. But I want to assure you that this is definitely not the case. Even in the restricted rule set, there are tons of cool skips and tech. Combat techniques such as rocket slobs, punch cancels, and mod swaps allow for absolute domination over the demons, and advanced movement tech like wall bashes, ballista boosting, and yeet hooking make quick work of the sections that can be skipped entirely. In fact, I think the rule set that has been established thus far has created one of the most well-paced and engrossing speedruns I've ever done. As for the despawning invisible walls, it's not as though we don't want to skip any of the intended gameplay. We just don't want to fly to the end of the level. NMG runs have plenty of super awesome skips. Xia boosts, yeet hooks, and ballista boosts lead to skipping whole combat encounters on Mars Core, Urdak, and even Super Gornest. Lots of invisible walls despawn after killing every enemy in the arena. In these instances, going over the wall is often a lot faster than completing the combat. As an example, this fight in Final Sin requires you to kill a Marauder, a Caco Demon, a Revenant, a Cyber Spider, and a ton more. But you can ballista boost and hook jump your way right over the invisible wall that disappears when you complete the combat. There aren't actually that many instances in the game where this is possible, so allowing it where it is possible keeps a nice balance between intended gameplay and cool skips. And obviously in 100%, you have to do most of the combat as intended or you'll miss out on some completion. The problem arises once again in a gray area emerging. Some of these techniques are a lot stronger than they may appear at first glance. Insert yeet hook trimping. When Doomguy attaches the meat hook to an enemy, you can hold left or right to gain a bunch of horizontal momentum. Then break the chain to yeet away from the enemy, hence yeet hook. However, this can be amplified with the use of the weapon wheel for maximum yeet. This can allow for skips like DHB hook here. This is a generally accepted, perfectly acceptable NMG trick. But what about this one? This is called Avocado Skip, and it goes from basically the start of Final Sin right to the final boss. Under the current rule set, this is totally legal, but it certainly doesn't feel like it should be. You see, this is what is known as a hook trip. If you gain a ton of momentum from a yeet hook, then slam into a ramp, you can shoot miles in the air and use this to skip lots of content. In the case of Avocado here, every invisible wall you go over does in fact despawn, so it's technically in bounds. But it's not a simple solution as banning the ability to trim from a yeet hook, as there are several well-liked tricks in the run already that allow for similar techniques, and some of those tricks can be done with alternate strategies like a Xia boost. At this point, all of the tech that is in the run is well liked, so it's no longer about what tech to ban, it's more about making sure that that tech doesn't get out of hand. Speaking of out of hand, just this week there was a vote in the community for 2 new skips to see if they should be allowed in the restricted categories. Starstruck.
You like those crazy ass Japanese movies, Machine Girl's definitely for you.
And Pineapple. At first glance, these tricks may look very similar, but there is some key distinctions between them. Starstruck starts off in Final Sin and has Doomguy hook trimp off the set of stairs and over these few invisible walls. These walls all despawn, and all that is skipped is one fight. For Pineapple, right at the end of Mars Core, you hook trimp off the stairs and go over the door and over a wall that despawns when you kill all the enemies. Both of these tricks do essentially the same thing. Skip one fight in the endgame by going over an invisible wall that despawns. They both are achieved by doing a hook tramp to gain height, and they both have a Xayah boost alternative that achieves the same thing. One of these tricks has been banned and the other is allowed. Can you guess which one just by looking? It turns out that Starstructs ended up being banned, while Pineapple was allowed. And the reason why is that the invisible wall on Starstruck is by far the tallest one we go over in the whole game. The next highest wall is only 2/3 the height, and when going over this one, you can proceed into the rest of the level at insane heights, making it effectively place you so high, it's hard not to argue that it isn't out of bounds. These decisions are made by consensus among the community, a vote that follows much deliberation by the nature of each trick, lots of testing, and what people feel is in the spirit of the category. Currently, the moderators and speedrunning community are deliberating how best to go forward with new techniques like avocado being found all the time. Creating a restricted category is an extremely complicated task, but with how broken Doom Eternal is, maintaining it might be even harder. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I have been loving speedrunning Doom Eternal no major glitches lately, and I've been streaming it most days on my Twitch, link in the description. Big shout out to Zombie Day, the current world record holder for both any percent and 100% Ultra Nightmare, for letting me use his footage, as well as Mute D6, the record holder for no major glitches. You guys have made me feel a welcome part of the community, and I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate these beautiful and cute patrons. If you enjoy my content, please consider supporting me there, as it's the best way to do so. Have a beautiful day. Thanks so much for watching.